You stand in a crowded square as the first flames lick upward, and a young woman's voice pierces the morning air, not a scream, but a prayer. Her words are steady even as the sulfur-soaked fabric begins to smoke. Around you, thousands have gathered, some crossing themselves, others shouting insults, all transfixed by what they've been told is justice. But the sound that will follow 10 unbroken minutes of agony, calling out a single name, will haunt this city for generations. Before we go deeper, I'd love to know, where in the world are you watching this from? It amazes me that we're all here, separated by centuries from this moment, yet connected by the same questions about what humans are capable of enduring and inflicting. This is Rouen, France. May 30th, 1431. The young woman burning at the center of this spectacle is 19 years old. Her name is Joan of Arc, and less than 2 years ago she was leading armies. Today she has been condemned as a heretic by a court that spent 5 months trying to break her. They failed. So now they will destroy her body instead. But what happened in this square, and the calculated cruelty behind it, went far beyond what most people realize. Joan's rise had been nothing short of miraculous, and that was precisely the problem. She was born in Domremy, a farming village so small it barely appeared on maps. Her childhood was ordinary, tending livestock, spinning wool, attending Mass. Then, at 13, she began hearing voices, not whispers of madness, but clear commands she believed came from St. Michael, St. Catherine, and St. Margaret. They told her France would be saved, and that she was the instrument of that salvation. Most would have dismissed a peasant girl claiming divine visions. But France was drowning. The 100 Years' War had dragged on for nearly a century. English forces occupied vast territories, and the French crown itself hung in the balance. Charles VII, the rightful heir, couldn't even be crowned. Reims, the traditional coronation city, was in enemy hands. When Joan arrived at Charles' court in 1429, she should have been laughed out of the room. Instead, something in her conviction, the absolute certainty in her eyes, the specific military strategies she described, the way she spoke of divine will, not as metaphor but as tactical reality, convinced desperate men to take a chance. They gave her armor, a banner, and access to troops. What happened next defied military logic. At Orleans, a city under siege and on the brink of surrender, Joan's presence transformed French forces. Soldiers who had been ready to flee suddenly charged English positions with reckless courage. Joan herself took an arrow through the shoulder and returned to battle the same day. Orleans was liberated. It was the turning point of the war. Within months, Charles VII was crowned at Reims, with Joan standing beside him in full armor. But triumph breeds enemies faster than defeat. English commanders were terrified not just of losing territory, but of what Joan represented. A peasant girl receiving visions, commanding armies, reshaping the war? It violated every assumption about power, gender, and divine favor. If God spoke to an illiterate farm girl, what did that say about kings and bishops? French nobles, too, grew uncomfortable. Joan didn't play court politics, didn't bow to hierarchies. She answered to voices only she could hear. That kind of independence is dangerous. Then came Compiègne. May 23, 1430. During a skirmish, Joan was cut off from her forces. The Burgundians, French nobles allied with England, captured her. It wasn't an accident. It was an opportunity. They sold her to the English for 10,000 livres tournois, a staggering sum that revealed exactly how valuable her destruction had become. She wasn't treated as a prisoner of war, afforded ransom or exchange. She was political contraband, a symbol to be dismantled. The English faced a dilemma. Simply executing Joan would make her a martyr and validate her claims of divine mission. They needed her discredited first, her reputation shattered, her visions declared demonic rather than holy. So they orchestrated a trial not to determine guilt, but to manufacture it. The court was assembled in Rouen, deep in English-controlled territory. 70 assessors, all clergy, many directly loyal to England or receiving English gold. The presiding judge, Pierre Cauchon, Bishop of Beauvais, was a man whose career depended on English favor. This was justice as theater, verdict already written, proceedings merely spectacle. Joan was held in a military prison, chained by the neck, waist, and ankles to a wooden block. Male guards watched her constantly. She was denied access to legal counsel, denied the right to hear Mass, denied even the basic dignity afforded to accused heretics. A church prison with female attendants. The conditions were designed to break her psychologically before the interrogations even began. When the trial opened in January 1431, Joan faced a panel of theologians determined to trap her. The questions came in waves about her visions, her voices, her wearing of men's clothing, her faith, her obedience to the church. They wanted her to contradict herself, to admit deception, to recant. She didn't, for weeks. This 19-year-old with no education in theology or law sparred with France's most learned clergy. When they asked if she was in God's grace, a theological trap, answering yes was presumption, no was damnation, she replied, "If I am not, may God put me there. If I am, may God keep me there." It was a perfect non-answer that infuriated them. When they questioned her male attire, she explained it was practical for military camps and protection against assault. When they demanded she submit her visions to the church's judgment, she refused. Her voices came from God, and God outranked bishops. But the court had time and tools she didn't. The isolation, the threats, the relentless questioning began to erode her. They brought her to a torture chamber, showed her the instruments, promised her agony. They threatened her with immediate execution. In May, exhausted and terrified, Joan signed an abjuration, a document renouncing her visions and promising to stop wearing male clothing. In exchange, her sentence was commuted from death to life imprisonment. It seemed like a victory for the court. Then something happened that sealed her fate. Days later, Joan was found wearing men's clothing again. The explanations vary. Some say her dress was taken and male clothing left as her only option, a deliberate trap. Others say she resumed it as protection after guards attempted assault. Joan herself said her voices had rebuked her for the abjuration, and she could not live a lie. Whatever the reason, the court had what it needed. She was declared a relapsed heretic. Under church law, that carried only one sentence, death by burning. The execution was scheduled with bureaucratic precision. May 30th at 9 in the morning in the old market square, where thousands could witness. The logistics were carefully planned, not for efficiency, but for suffering. The executioner, Geoffroy Therridge, received explicit instructions. Joan must burn alive and remain conscious as long as possible. The pyre was built unusually high, making it impossible for him to show the customary mercy of strangling the condemned before the flames reached them. Joan's clothing was soaked in sulfur to accelerate burning. Every detail was engineered to maximize agony and spectacle. When Joan was led into the square, she was calm. Witnesses described her asking for a cross, and an English soldier broke 2 sticks into a crude crucifix, which she tucked into her dress. A formal cross was brought from a nearby church, and she held it before her face as she was bound to the stake. The crowd was massive. Estimates range from thousands to 10,000. English soldiers formed a perimeter. Clergy stood in positions of prominence. The sentence was read aloud, a final litany of her supposed crimes: heresy, relapse, idolatry, invoking demons. Then the torches were lowered. The flames climbed quickly, fed by sulfur and dry wood. Joan began to pray aloud, calling on Jesus, on the saints, on God. Her voice carried across the square. And then the screaming started. Not the brief cries of someone overcome by smoke, but prolonged, sustained agony as the fire consumed her. For 10 minutes, an eternity, her voice echoed. Some in the crowd wept. Others looked away. Many later reported feeling they had witnessed not justice, but murder. An English soldier who had mocked her earlier was heard saying afterward, "We are lost. We have burned a saint." The executioner himself was shaken. He later confessed to a friar that despite the intense fire, Joan's heart and internal organs remained intact. Refusing to burn fully an occurrence he took as a sign of her innocence. Therridge admitted he feared for his own soul, believing he had killed a holy woman. English officials, worried that relics might be venerated, ordered Joan's remains burned twice more, then her ashes thrown into the Seine to prevent any physical remnant from becoming a symbol. But symbols don't require relics. The brutality of Joan's death did the opposite of what was intended. Rather than crushing French resistance, it ignited it. The image of a young woman burned alive for claiming God spoke to her became a rallying cry. Charles VII, whose crown Joan had secured, launched investigations years later. In 1456, a retrial was convened, this time genuinely seeking truth. Witnesses testified about the coercion, the rigged trial, the denial of rights. The original verdict was annulled. Joan was declared innocent, a martyr, a victim of political vengeance disguised as religious justice. Her influence grew with time. Artists painted her. Writers penned plays and poems. By 1920, nearly 5 centuries after her death, the Catholic Church canonized her Saint Joan of Arc, patron saint of France, of soldiers, of prisoners. But her legacy extends beyond religion or nationalism. Joan became a symbol of resistance against tyranny, of individual conscience against institutional power, of the courage to stand by truth even when the cost is unbearable. What remains most striking is this: Joan was killed not for what she did wrong, but for what she represented. A girl who refused to accept her place, who claimed authority beyond human structures, who inspired others to believe change was possible. Her execution was meant to be a demonstration of power. Instead, it revealed power's fragility, the fear underlying every authoritarian cruelty, the desperate violence of systems threatened by a single voice of defiance. In the end, the flames in Rouen Square did not erase Joan of Arc. They forged her into something indestructible, a memory that refuses to fade, a question every generation must answer. When conviction stands against consensus, when one voice contradicts 1,000, when the cost of truth is everything, what do we do? Joan answered with her life, and that answer still burns, brighter than any fire they could set.